Before we get into booking flights and how to do that and which softwares to use, I'm going to talk to you about the terminology behind award travel. It's a little bit different than the cash-based program, and so you're going to want to understand what it means when we talk about stopovers and open jaws and things like that. So let's get into it. Each kind of award chart has its pros and cons. I'll talk about 5 basic kinds of award charts today. These are the ones that I tend to think about and use. You can get maybe a little more technical than this, but since I've been doing this for the last 7 years or so, I've never once needed all those super technical terms. So this is kind of the basic 5. The first one is cash-based, basically Southwest. You can see on the left column there, that is the cash price of the ticket, and then on the right is the award price of the ticket. The higher the cash price of the ticket, the higher the award price of the ticket, and vice versa. When it comes to distance-based award charts, the award is based on how far you fly. Relatively simple. This is what British Airways uses. They have a slightly different award chart if you're booking with one of their One World partners. But for booking with British Airways, this is what it looks like during their peak season. They have one for off-peak travel and peak travel, which would be like holidays and things like that. If you fly less than 650 miles, it's going to be 5,250 miles in economy or 9,750 miles in business. I'm not sure why you would need business class for a flight that's approximately 30 minutes, but if you can't find availability in economy, it may be worth it. Here's an example. If you were to go from London to Charles de Gaulle, which is the airport in Paris, it would be the same price as going to Milan, Italy, because they're both in the first band of under 650 miles. On the other hand, if you were to fly to Venice, which is just over 650 miles, you would pay the next zone. The way to figure out how far a flight is to go to gcmap.com. It's not the prettiest site, but it works very well. I've used it for years. It's free, and it always gives you relatively good information. Only one thing to be aware of is sometimes airlines calculate the distance of flights slightly different. So for a flight that's 5,000 miles, let's go back to this award chart here. A flight that's 1,151 miles on GC map, some airlines might calculate it a few miles more or a few miles less. So you just have to be aware there's a little bit of variance on the edges, but for the most part, it's not going to vary by hundreds of miles or anything like that. But gcmap.com, great resource. Zone-based award charts are generally going to be where you're going to find the most value for your miles. And I'll give you a great example here. Turkish Airlines has a zone-based award charts for domestic flights. Now, if you live in a small country, that's not very helpful. But if you live in the United States, which Turkish Airlines considers to be all 50 states, Puerto Rico, as well as the U.S. Virgin Islands, you can book a flight in economy class for 10,000 miles one way. Remember that Turkish Airlines also transfers from Capital One. So if you were to spend $5,000 on a Capital One card, you would get 10,000 Turkish Airlines, well, you would have 10,000 Capital One miles that you could then transfer to Turkish Airlines and book this flight. Their system is very difficult to use, and we will talk about that in a later video, but I do want you to know that there is huge value here. Even if you're flying a long distance, like you're going from Washington, D.C. to Honolulu, Hawaii, it's all the same price as if you're going from Washington, D.C. to Atlanta, Georgia. Here's another zone-based award chart that we'll be talking a lot about, and this is ANA, All Nippon Airways, a Japanese airline based out of Tokyo. And here is what their chart looks like for most of you who I'm assuming will be watching this course are in Hawaii, North America, and Europe. So if you were to fly, they have L, R, and H. L stands for low season, R stands for regular season, H stands for high season. Most dates are going to fall in the low and regular season. There are a few days like cherry blossom season, Christmas, and New Year's that are in the high season. And then the Y stands for economy class, PY stands for premium economy, C stands for business class, and F stands for first class. Don't ask me how they got those. Maybe they're fare codes, I'm not sure. So this is where miles are going to be so valuable, and it's basically in the higher classes. So here's an example for a round-trip flight in economy class between San Francisco and Tokyo. in April, you're going to pay just over $1,000. For premium economy, you're going to pay almost $3,000. For business, you're going to pay just over $8,000, and for first, you're going to pay just over $21,000. I've put on the right side there how much additional cash you're going to have to pay, how much extra cash you're going to have to pay in relation to economy class. So you can see 2 times more, 7 times more, 19 times more. If you go instead to miles prices, instead of 50,000 miles, you're going to pay 72,000 in premium economy, which is 0.4 times more, 40% more. In business, you're going to pay 1.1 times more, and in first, you're going to pay 2.4 times more. So if you compare those against each other, you can see that the extra expense in cash is a ton more than the extra expense in miles. So we've talked a lot about cents per mile. Here's another way to think about it. Obviously, cents per mile for economy, you're getting just over 1 cent. Not the best redemption value. In premium economy, you're getting a really good redemption value. In business, you're getting an incredible redemption value. And in first, it's off the charts. Now, would you really pay $21,000 for a first class ticket? Probably not. I mean, if you are, I'm not sure why you're watching this course, but no problem. Are you really getting 12 cents back? Well, you are, but is it worth $21,000 to you to fly first class? You know, maybe not. So anyways, this is the cash equivalent. Your own personal value of it may change, but essentially the highest levels of the highest classes are where the biggest value is for your miles, because there is an outsized difference between the way airlines price premium cabin fares in cash versus the way that they price premium cabin fares in miles. Now, the problem, of course, is that to book a cash fare is very easy, and you can do it in about 10 minutes. To book a fare with miles, for most routes, is more tedious and takes a lot more time, and you have to set alerts and wait for the seat to come available that you want. And if you have a connecting flight, you need to make sure there are seats on both flights. So it's a lot more painful, but you do save a ton of money and you get these great travel experiences that you probably wouldn't want to pay $8,000 for. The joy that you will feel if you do get one of these deals is immense, because you are sitting next to people who paid $8,000 for their ticket and you paid the taxes and fees. But it doesn't come without a few tears, to be honest. There are hybrid award charts as well, which are based on how far you fly and where you fly. So Aeroplan, for example, has all these different zones, and then when you're flying between specific zones or flying within those zones, they have different prices for each individual one. So here's their award chart between North America and their Pacific zone, which would be Asia. You can see if you fly up to 5,000 miles, in economy, 35,000 points, in business, 55,000, and in if you fly over 5,000, it's going to be 50,000 and 75,000 respectively. So here's an example of just a nuance. A 9-hour flight to Seattle is going to be 35,000 miles. A 9-hour and 25-minute flight to San Francisco is going to be 50,000 miles, 15,000 miles more. So if you live in Seattle, fortunate for you, Aeroplan is a great program to be able to book these flights across the pond. And that is basically just because, according to the GC map, again, one of them is under 5,000 miles and one of them is over 5,000 miles. The latest introduction to the miles game comes from most of the American carriers who have dynamic prices. And these prices vary based on the demand. And it is very difficult to figure out what exactly they're doing and why they price it sometimes. But there are still great deals out there. For example, American says that they charge $7,500 to fly within the 48 contiguous United States and Canada from $7,500. But I've seen flights even less than $7,500. American is one of these wacky carriers where sometimes there's a $400 flight that's 7,500 miles, and then there's another $400 flight that's 30,000 miles. So it's kind of hard to figure out what they're doing and why, but I'm a fan of it because you can book a lot of last minute flights on American and go a long ways, and your miles will just can be really valuable, and you can find those outsized rate deals. When we're booking flights in future videos, you're going to want to understand fare codes. You don't need to know the individual fare codes until you actually know kind of like which route you want to fly. But just for example, on United, they have 2 fare codes for business class awards. They may have more actually, but I'm not aware of. I don't really need to know anything other than I. If I see I, United Polaris Business, it means that there's a business class seat available. And so that's going to be about 80,000 miles on this route from San Francisco to Germany. And then the next flight down you can see is a JN fare. So a JN fare is like only United seats, and you can only book that with United miles. They're not going to release that space to partners. So you can see when you go on Air Canada's website Aeroplan and you look for flights from San Francisco to Frankfurt, you're going to see the flight that is an I fare, but you're not going to see the flight that is a JN fare. So it used to be that United released all of their I fares to partners. Now they don't release all of them, but I would say most of them still get released. So in general, you should be able to book these flights, but just knowing that there are fare codes out there and that there is some you can book by using partners and some you can't, it's going to be helpful. Another thing to be aware of is a term called stopovers. So this is something that ANA allows, for example. In the previous example, we talked about going from San Francisco to Tokyo. ANA, when you're booking an award, allows a free stopover. So you could book a flight to Vietnam that goes through Tokyo, and as long as there's a seat to Tokyo and a seat to Vietnam, you can book it. But what you would do is say, hey, I want to spend 4 days in Tokyo and see Tokyo because I've never seen it before. It won't cost you anything extra to stop over. You can just stop for 4 days and then carry on. You don't have to book 2 separate tickets. That's what a stopover is. Not all airlines allow it, but the ones that do it can be a great value for you to get 2 trips instead of 1. Open jaw means that you fly into one airport and out of another, or conversely, you fly out of one airport and into another. This can be a great way to see Europe, for example, without having to return all the way to Scotland. If you booked this flight to Scotland and you wanted to go down to Greece, you don't have to get back to Scotland. You can just find your way to Greece and then book the flight back from Greece. Again, you're not going to pay anything different than the round trip price. Not all airlines allow this one either, but some of them do, and it's a great way to get more trips for your miles.